Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Rejuvenate Edition 3. We are midway through day one's agenda, and we've got an extremely exciting guest here today. His name is Aidil Iman Aidid, who is the communication campaigner for My Hutan.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome.
So glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for this session today to further explore about what I do at My Hutan and what we do for forest conservation.
Great. Now, just very quickly, Aidil 22 has been active in advocating for environmental justice, climate action, and nature conservation for the last 3 years. Obviously, his passion lies in policy making and research for sustainability, especially through linking climate action with biodiversity conservation. Now, a lot of big words there, and a lot of people may get scared with all these jargons and whatnot, but I maybe perhaps just to kickstart the conversation here, how did you get involved 3 years back? Like, what was there a trigger point to it? I understand you are born and bred in KL. You know, it's a concrete jungle here. Was that why you thought I need to protect the forest or somewhat like that? You know, Aidil, please do share with us.
Definitely. I think when I started to recognize that there are severe environmental degradations that's happening in Malaysia, my complete assumption was that it only affects the environment, whether it's climate change, overfishing, pollution, deforestation. My first assumption was that it's going to affect only the environment and biodiversity, but that's completely untrue. Most of our human rights to water, food security, adequate housing, are derived from natural resources, are dependent on the sustainability of biodiversity. So I completely realized that human rights are very much interconnected with the planetary health. For example, climate change prohibits our accessibility to water and sanitation. It causes damaging effects to rice crop production, which means that our human rights are pretty much threatened from these kind of like ecological crises. So from 3 years ago, I completely realized that, you know, there is a human connection, there is a social connection between biodiversity loss and human livelihoods, that we are very much dependent on nature. One could say that nature doesn't depend on humans, but I think that's untrue. I think nature does depend on humans for legislations that matter, protected areas, policies, advocacy. So I realized from my point of view 3 years ago when I was around 19 years old that, you know, championing environmental justice, climate action, advocacy for nature also translates to fighting for human rights and the livelihoods of everyone on this planet.
Fantastic. And you were from Victoria Institution before this, correct?
Yes, I was.
Were you already active in school at that point in time, or was there a particular program or club in school at that time that kind of correlates with what you do today?
I think I have to admit that I was not very, I did not participate in any active activities when I was in Victoria Institution, which is to my regret, because I wish I could have done more. I wish I would have been, I could have been in debate and in perhaps the environmental club, but I did not. I saw an opportunity to delve into environmental advocacy later after high school when I was like 19 years old. So that is a missed opportunity right there. But I'm very glad and proud that I've realized it at 19 years old and started to do more as I become older.
So that's key advice there for our high school students who are tuning in, or parents or educators that are tuning in, get your kids involved in this sort of activity very early on in life, and hopefully as it kind of like mold them into being individuals who would really care about such things, right? Yeah. So
Definitely, I agree.
yeah. So before I moved on a little bit further, you are currently attached to My Hutan, which is a movement powered by Undi 18 that focuses on institutionalizing forest conservation in Malaysia. Perhaps give us an overview of what is this Undi 18, if anyone has not heard of it yet. And of course, for the benefit of our overseas audiences as well. And what are the different branches of movements and initiatives that are under the Undi 18 umbrella?
Oh, definitely. Undi 18 first started as a Malaysian youth movement, which I have to say has successfully advocated for the amendment of the Article 119, 1 of the Federal Constitution to reduce the minimum voting age from 21 years old to 18 years old. As you can see, it's been quite a struggle with the new governments and moving from one government to another to actually implement the right to vote to 18 years old. So Undi 18 has a lot of movements under its, basically movements that have their own jurisdiction, that have their own forms of advocacy, that have their own agenda, strategies, and so on. But we all are connected. We are all very happy to work with each other. Some of these movements, aside from My Hutan, there are movements like the 1-1 initiative that focuses on 50% of female representation in parliament, where there is, there are actual women politicians that can have equal representation, because so far right now there's not really equal representation of women in politics, where much of it is very catered to men in positions of power. There are other movements that focus on electrifying Malaysia sustainably, making sure that everyone has accessibility to electricity like tenaga belia, which I think is one of the movements under Undi 18 that is really co-aligned with My Hutan, because we're both focused on sustainability when one is focused on energy and one is focused on forest conservation. But there are a lot of other movements under Undi 18 that makes a lot of difference, like Undi Saksama. There are movements focused in Borneo, Malaysia, like Undi Sabah and Undi Sarawak, which I believe are mobilized by great young people who have become great mutuals of mine, who I've met in real life as well and learned so much from. So I'm really glad to be in this family of young activists, young advocates under Undi 18.
It's so fantastic, and I think this was it just yesterday. YB Hannah Yo did spoke about how she would like YB Dato Azlina to be heading the home ministry, for example, right? So those are really examples of how the 111 initiative, for example, is really pushing the agenda in terms of having 50% representation, female representation in parliament or in politics, for example. So that's so fantastic. Now, My Hutan, I suppose my question here is, how come My Hutan for you personally? I'm sure there were other NGOs or other movements out there that perhaps does something similar to My Hutan, but what attracted you to My Hutan?
Oh, definitely. I remember when My Hutan was first launched last year, when they were looking for volunteers for the communications and research departments. So a lot of people were tagging me on Twitter saying that you should join this, and then I've met Kira when we first had our Awani Pagi talk together regarding youth upholding human rights. she told me about what she does at Undi 18. She said that there are a lot of young people out there that recognize me as an environmentalist. And I've known some of them, for example, like Rifki Faisal, who's an amazing youth advocate under Undi 18. So, you know, when we had that conversation, not long after the next year, this application of My Hutan came about on Twitter, and everyone was saying that you should join this and everything. And I was really interested because so far, within the first 2 years of my advocacy, I've been really solo about it. I've been really a solo rider. I've been, let me just volunteer at the given rehabilitation center, Zunagara, just volunteering on a 1 day basis rather than a full-time commitment. But then I thought that I could make a difference because of my personal passion for biodiversity conservation. I do have passion for climate change and other environmental issues, but I've started mine with biodiversity, and My Hutan is a perfect place and platform for me to utilize my passion. And when I sent out my application form, a few months later, I was inducted, and I've met Karma and Kira and other young people who are in My Hutan, and we've become really, really close in terms of like advocacy, and also in terms of like relying on each other for knowledge. There are great conservationists in My Hutan who I really admire, who I always depend on for resources. So it's a great platform to be on because I've been so alone at it, and now I've realized that there is power in solidarity and togetherness.
Yes, definitely. That collective voice, especially the youth voice today, is so powerful, strong, and it resonates with so many people and throughout society that it's very important for us to have people like you and Kira and everyone else at Undi 18 and the umbrella, or the big family of it, right? And not just Undi 18, but also the whole ecosystem, I suppose, of activists and advocates for such things. So it's fantastic. It's beautiful. Now, what are some of the past campaigns or projects that perhaps you can just walk us through a little bit from My Hutan, and perhaps segue towards one of the latest ones that you have going on?
Oh, definitely. I think one of the most critical projects that we had were, one of them was a collaboration with Malaysian Youth Delegation, where some of our members, some of our campaigners from My Hutan were invited to do a series of talks with Malaysian Youth Delegation regarding climate action. I think and we've lent a lot of our research campaigners like Natasha, Amir, and Shakil, who are really policy savvy, who really do work, you know, Natasha and Amir, who really do work in actual wildlife conservation and know the knowledge of mobilizing local communities. So that was one of the one of the earliest projects that we had with MYD, you know, in moving towards youth action in climate change. But also we've had collaborative projects where we had forums on water security and forest conservation, where we noticed that there needs to be a vocal platform where an activist, an NGO, and the government must be involved. So we had that session where we invited persons from Jabatan Perhutanan Malaysia, WWF, and also an activist known as, her name is Shakila from Costa Perak. So they gave their inputs regarding forest conservation and water security. This was called the Thirsty Talks, I believe. It's on our Instagram. So it was a very long session that was fruitful about how water security is definitely connected with forest conservation, because we did that session right after Selangor was facing water cuts. And so it was really crucial and important to let people know that forest conservation does play a role in terms of water security. But that was in the past. We've had that collaboration with MYD, Charisma Movement. On going to today, we have a monthly engagement that we just introduced, a monthly social media engagement that we introduced called hashtag MyBio. So MyBio is mobilized by two of our communications campaigners, Iman and Haziq, who are really great at it when I've seen what the outcome of this project. So MyBio is a monthly social media engagement teaching Malaysians about biodiversity, local biodiversity. So the first post was about the Cameron Highlands pit viper, which is an endemic species at Cameron Highlands, Pahang, as well as the pitcher plant. So, you know, we introduced MyBio as a way where Malaysians could access to My Hutan and see the local flora and fauna on a monthly basis. So this is great work that has been mobilized by the communications team, especially Iman and Haziq. Other than that, of course, we've had this tremendous movement called Misi Mencari Menteri and Menteri Aku Hijau, which is a movement that we are mobilizing, a press statement that we have released, calling for qualified, competent leadership across environmental governance for the new cabinet, where ministers that will be helming environment, biodiversity, climate change, and natural resources will have, you know, 5 achievable leadership qualities that will make them the perfect candidate. So we hope so in that mission towards a new ministers to be really competent, to have really good governance skills. And that's the latest project that we really are mobilizing and garnering so much attention about.
Aidil, which is what I want to segue into in a very short while. But if you don't mind, we've already got a couple of questions here from the chat, from the audience. I would like to address that first before we go into hashtag Misi Mencari Menteri Hijau. You know, this is from Julia. It says here, "Hi Aidil, just to share a story. My 6-year-old niece has been learning about the environment currently, and she actually understands the importance of taking care of the environment at only 6 years old. Now, I think educating the younger generation is no longer an issue, since many are starting young now to learn about the importance of environment. The issue, I feel, is educating the older generation." Any thoughts on that? Is it too late to teach old dogs new trick?
Well, I think, you know, I think this relates back to the conversations that I had with my family members, especially my parents. They are very proud of me. They recognize what I do. They are very supportive. I'm quite privileged to be in a family that's financially stable, that could support my, for example, if I wanted to go to Rao for a volunteering session, they would support it wholeheartedly. But convincing them earlier stages were really difficult, you know. But it's also about how you can make the conversations happen with older generations. Sometimes you just have to be really mean, but not mean, but really funny in a way that's really, you know, that strikes a little bit of like, oh, maybe this is something that I regret. Is about that, you know, I think we are one of the last generations to actually witness the extinction of Sumatran rhinos in Malaysia. We are literally Gen Z, millennials, Gen Y, the last generations to see Sumatran rhino in Malaysia to go extinct. So could we enable the same fate for Malayan tigers, hornbills, elephants, and so on? So when I said that to my parents, that, you know, it struck a good conversation, a healthy conversation, discussion about how older generations have, you know, some parts of generational, there are generational problems that have led to the decline of biodiversity, where, you know, these companies, these policies that are lacking stricter enforcement, these laws that are not good enough, when we recognize that forest conservation was too late in the 70s. So it's definitely like a discussion that has to be made. You have to play with the conversation, the discussion that you want to make with your parents, your grandparents, about how certain species could not be allowed to go extinct in the future, because if I can't allow that for my children, you should have allowed it in the first place as well. So it's definitely struck that kind of like moment for my parents. And then they started to like, I need to support you in whatever you do, and I fully recognize what you do in any form that you need, in terms whether it's financial support or moral support. My parents are always there. Education for youngsters in Malaysia is a different thing. We do have problems with climate literacy, where our minimum where our surface awareness on climate change is just about what are the greenhouse gases, what are causing global warming. It's not about, is it fossil fuels, is it deforestation, is it who are responsible, and as well as what can we do collectively to prevent the climate crisis from getting much worse. So I think awareness is there definitely among young people when there are like climate strikes and climate protests happening. But education is still a salient factor in building awareness among children and students. And this is what we stress on within our mission to find competent ministers for the environment.
Now, one more question before we move into that exciting new campaign that we've got, right? The question here says, how challenging is it to get youths staying in an urban environment to get interested in issues of deforestation in Malaysia, in other states, like, for example, in the East Coast? Now, also adding on to that question, I would also like to ask, is there I guess, a perception where people who are within the circles of doing this kind of advocacy and activism are people within the same circle? Is that the case, or do you see on a monthly, on a yearly basis, there are new faces, there are new people, there are new youths that are stepping up to say, hey, I want to become the next Aidil. I want to become the next Kira. I want to become the next Shakil, for example. So two things there, I suppose. Are the urban kids even bothered about what is happening in Tasik Chini? And, is this a closed circle thing?
When it comes to forest ecosystem degradation, on the outlook of Twitter, definitely young people that I've noticed from urban settlements are more passionate about it. They are vocal about it. They are willing to, share petitions, make tweets, give out their inputs and voices about that. So I've noticed that there is tremendous support from urban youths when it comes to environment. I think particularly because they live in an environment where there's not much forest left, where there's limited access to nature, and that the only place that they could be involved with nature would be the parks that we have, or during volunteering activities for example with NGOs like Free Tree Society Malaysia. But there is a problem where, like today, like myself, there is a repetitive way, where repetitive method where activists or environmentalists such as myself are invited to talk at forums and so on. So there's a very, I hope people aren't bored to see my face all the time, like most of the time when it comes to these youth programs. But there is a repetitive method to it, which I've experienced from my own personal experience. When it comes to environmentalists in Klang Valley, it's a very small circle. Climate Action, Malaysian Youth Delegation, and each of these organizations have their own, vocal spokesperson. Like when I think of Climate Action, I think of Ili Nadia, who is a really amazing feminist activist on climate justice. And when I think of UNICEF, I think of Jasmine Irisha. When I think of MYD, I think of Shakil and Reza. When I think of Undi 18, of course, I think of Kira. So I think there is, when it comes to environmentalists in Klang Valley, everyone knows everyone. But I wish, I've not seen new faces enter. Perhaps that's my own ignorance. Perhaps I've not ventured or, go out as much to see new activists or new environmentalists to speak at sessions like these. But unfortunately, I've not noticed it so far. But I'm pretty sure there are these kind of activists, because I've done, moderated sessions with them. But most of the time, I always do with the same people at these sessions. So I'm wishing for my next session, I think I have a talk with with University Malaya Wales, with Nick Sizula from Cloth Care. So that would be a breath of fresh air, because she's been doing this for a long time, and I look forward to that session.
Fantastic. I was just gonna immediately jump into hashtag Menteri Aku Hijau, but a question popped in as you were talking, and I think let's address that before we move on to the other thing. So this is from Vikraman. Hi Aidil. Malaysia level, we still using coal as major power source. What are the drastic and immediate action needs to be taken to avoid increasing carbon release and balance out energy demand?
Definitely, because I am definitely not very articulate when it comes to energy, definitely. But I've always been a vocal person when it comes to ending fossil fuel combustion. 86 based on the IPCC sixth assessment report, we know that 86% of emission growth comes from fossil fuel combustion alone. Well, the remaining is perhaps from land use changes. Personally, my passion is on land use changes, deforestation, agriculture, development, and so on. But we cannot ignore the fact that fossil fuel plays a huge, significant role in energy production, and Malaysia is very dependent on coal, and that coal is from Indonesia, and we're building momentum towards it, rather than there has been a climate action council that was formed, but it was not drastic enough to end fossil fuels or to justly and fairly transition to renewable energy. I think there needs to be that kind of transition where we completely, achieve real zero emissions by cutting our fossil fuel use and transitioning fairly and equitably and justly towards renewable energy. I think that's really possible if we have that kind of commitment, because so far our commitments have been really surface, have been really they're just commitments or just calls to action rather than actual implementation of reducing fossil fuel use. I can't speak on it on a credible level, but I do believe that we need to end fossil fuel use to prevent the climate crisis from getting much worse.
Okay, great. Hashtag Menteri Aku Hijau, hashtag Misi Mencari Menteri. Big thing that came out over the weekend, and it has been talked about even until today. You mentioned briefly about it as well, and I believe you have got a couple of slides to share and perhaps just run us through what this entire thing is all about. Yes?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
All right.
Great. We will pull up the slides now. Okay. So this is a social media pack. You said to have the 5 points.
Mm-hmm. Well,
perhaps you can kickstart.
Okay, sure. When it comes to this was an idea brought by one of our campaigners, Shakil, who really addressed that we need to have competent ministers leading environmental governance. And there is a problem. Well, I don't know if it's a problem or not, but if you notice within the Perikatan National Coalition as well as the Pakatan Harapan Coalition, there are two separate ministries. One is Ministry of, when Yobiin was helming MESTEC, you know, Ministry of Environment, Climate Change, and so on. And then Xavier was helming Minister of Land, Water, and Natural Resources. This is also translated to the Perikatan National Coalition, where there is a Ministry of Environment and Water and a Ministry of Natural Resources and Energy. Why this is a problem to me particularly is because they're two separate entities. For example, when Malaysians think of deforestation, when Malaysians think of ecosystem degradation, or for example, like forest governance, what are laws regarding forests, regarding biodiversity, they would assume that it's under the Ministry of Environment. But that's completely not true within the two coalitions that we had. It's actually under the Ministry of Natural Resources. So there's a confusion right there where people are thinking that Ministry of Environment is helming the jurisdiction of forests and biodiversity. While they are interconnected, while they do work together, but it's completely two different ministries with two different ministers. So that's why we were really precise about it, saying that we are calling for the new cabinet to have competent, qualified leadership of new ministers that will govern biodiversity, environment, climate change, and natural resources. So these four different, topics or issues. So we've decided that there needs to be 5 qualities. These are 5 achievable qualities within a minister. The first one being, expertise. Why expertise is important? Because we really do need a minister that has preferably a science background or an academically a STEM background, but also knows what is going on regarding ministerial affairs. They need to know what's happening within those ministries that are governing the environment, biodiversity, climate change, and natural resources. They also need to have great stakeholder engagement, is politically astute. And then we move on into our second quality that we look for, which is, integrity, which means that these persons that you would elect to be the new ministers in the cabinet to be, Menteri Aku Hijau, needs to be away from corruption, needs to be open about data that is open by default, meaning that, because we've had problems in forestry where data that is on paper does not translate into what is real life. So there is a problem there. And there are problems where NGOs have to pay paywalls to access to state gazettes, which means that data is inaccessible to most people. So we hope that the new minister would reform this under the second quality, which is integrity. The third one is being, of course, commitment. And I think this is the easiest quality within a minister. It's about having commitments to align themselves with the IPCC 6th Assessment Report, IPBES Global Assessment on Biodiversity and Ecosystems, to make sure that they follow guidelines that we have ratified within Paris Agreement, within Convention on Biological Diversity, and the Sustainable Development Goals. This is, I believe this is the most achievable quality in any other ministers or any other person, because it's literally following the guidelines, following the science, following the reports, following the policies that have been suggested by scientists in internationally recognized reports. The fourth quality that we look for in a minister is definitely implementation. Why implementation is important is because we keep talking about safeguarding nature, stopping climate change from getting much worse, preventing pollution, and so on. But what are the ways to implement these degradations of ecosystems? What are the ways that a minister needs to be fully aware of? So there are a lot of methods that we have provided, for example, as examples. My Hutan is a movement focused on sustainable financing of forest conservation. So we are really out there to make sure that, because a lot of ministers have complained that, there's no financial success or viable income from protection of forests. But if we log it down, if we destroy them, there's much more to gain financially. That's completely wrong, because forests act as a natural barrier. They prevent, they are crucial in terms of flood mitigation, pollination, natural resources. They are really important for economic success in the long term. So a lot of ministers, a lot of, Menteri Besar, are thinking that logging down forests is the only way to gain financial momentum. So that's why we're pushing for an ecological fiscal transfer, which means that the federal government will redistribute tax revenues to state governments to conserve their biodiversity. So this is one of the examples that we provide in the fourth quality, which is implementation. But there are other methods like carbon tax, payment for environmental services, improve education in terms of climate literacy and environmental awareness, stricter legislations and policies, and good environmental governance. And the last one is, of course, inclusivity, the fifth quality that we look for new ministers that will be leading the environment, climate change, biodiversity, and natural resources in the new cabinet. Why inclusivity is important is because we need the stakeholder engagement that is meaningful, which means that Orang Asli's inputs are well placed. There are methods of gender responsive climate action. There are youth participation. Why this is important is because, for example, indigenous people comprise of only 5% of the world's population. The world's population of indigenous people is just 5%. But somehow they protect 80% of the world's biodiversity. That is 80%, 80%. Crazy. That is a lot. So when we give full ownership to Orang Asli, indigenous people, to their land rights, we give them an opportunity to conserve nature. We give them leadership. We give them participation that is meaningful. Another example is climate change. Climate change has disproportionate effects on women. In countries like Uganda, there are women who are suffering from gender-based violence that are derived from climate change's effects. So how do we provide meaningful gender-responsive action in terms of climate action in Malaysia? Because we know that in disasters like floods, there needs to be effective gender-responsive action, like providing menstrual pads to women, because you don't really think about that when floods happen, when people are displaced. People donate food, of course, that's great, and they donate money, but sometimes they don't donate menstrual pads, so that is a form of actual gender responsive action when it comes to climate action, to have menstrual pads to be donated, but also helping pregnant women who are displaced from floods. How do you mobilize pregnant women, right? So that is what the inclusivity means in the last quality. So these qualities, I believe, are really achievable. They are really, really, they're not really far stretching. They're not really hard to achieve. It's really easy. I believe it should be easy to find a minister who's really committed, who has the expertise, who wants to be inclusive, who is not corrupted. I believe there is hope for that in this new cabinet. It should be about hope, because this press statement is all about hope. It's all about garnering attention for Misi Mencari Menteri and Menteri Aku Hijau, who has qualified leadership skills to be moving us towards climate action and biodiversity protection, because these are the two biggest crises that are happening on our planet. And our social media packs today are out for use. You can use them anytime you want with the hashtag Misi Mencari Menteri, hashtag Menteri Aku Hijau, and utilize them to call for the government under the new government, where the new cabinet needs to have these qualified leadership skills, especially those 5 qualities that we look for from My Hutan. So I believe there is a link here at that we provide. You can go to My Hutan's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We do have a Linktree link where we have provided the social media pack. All you have to do is to click the button, and you can find the social media pack available, and you can post it everywhere. Link it, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, anywhere you want to garner as much as attention to our press statement and our demand for qualified leadership in environmental governance.
I'll also be sure to share those links to our audiences after the session as well, Aidil. And you know, you kind of gave us a whole backstory to the whole new campaign of you know, Misi Mencari Menteri and whatnot, and you know, really from the bottom of our Malaysian hearts, we thank the team for coming up with this and to put this press statement out. I know I'm putting you a little bit on a spot, but if you have a name in mind today, perhaps to cover at least some of the 5 traits that you're looking at, does a name pop up in your mind?
Unfortunately, I cannot think of any. A lot of my friends would, of course, but this is not from the current government. A lot of my friends praise people like Yeo Bee Yin. And to my opinion, she has, you know, some flaws in terms of policy and engagement, you know, and I think before PH, there was one Junaidi who was leading natural resources and environment. I've been told he has a good track record in terms of youth engagement. I'm not so sure about that, but these, you know, Yeo Bee Yin and one Junaidi are the 2 names that have helmed these positions before. And I've been told by other activists, I don't know whether they are biased about it, but they've told me that, you know, these people have had a great or a, you know, a surface track record in mobilizing towards that direction. But I believe that we should really have an opportunity to uncover new faces in the future. And I really am, you know, even though this press statement is all about being hopeful, me personally, I could not think on top of my head of a perfect candidate other than possibly someone who is a senator to help this position, who have the capacity to lead this position. So yeah.
Okay. I suppose what's coming up next. So now that this one has got legs and has built some form of traction and momentum, what's next with My Hutan?
Definitely, like because we are striving towards, you know, for building political will and political engagement. After this, you know, I believe the cabinet list will be released really soon, by this week or next week. We don't really know. It's something to look forward to, whether they have really adhered to our press statement. It would be unfortunate if they do not. But we have to move forward beyond that as well. So My Hutan is definitely committed towards, because we've just had, you know, new members coming in, more young people, vibrant, so energetic, young people that just joined My Hutan. So we are moving towards, you know, perhaps convincing politicians that forest conservation is economically important for people's livelihoods, for biodiversity, and so on. We do hope to collaborate with, you know, internationally recognized NGOs or networks like the United Nations in being a key focal point of youth in Malaysia on biodiversity, because we've had Malaysian youth delegation is very much established when it comes to climate change with the UN. They've attended COP and everything. But not a lot of people know that there is a COP version for biodiversity. COP 15 just happened. It will happen I believe it will happen in China. It's a version of biodiversity, and I would really like to see My Hutan to be the vocal voice of youth at COP regarding Convention on Biological Diversity under the United Nations. We would really like to see that kind of platform given to us so we can participate. But also, I think building political engagement and networking is really important under My Hutan, because we want to convince politicians, state ministers, other state governments that, forest conservation needs to happen, protected areas need to be widened, and that, logging is not the only way to garner economic success. If you protect forests, you prevent, these future disasters that will happen in your states. We want to convince them in that perspective.
Fantastic. Now, I suppose parting words from you, Aidil, from a youth to another youth, and perhaps from a youth to an elder. What is the message you would like to give?
Right. I think for young people, for young Malaysians especially, I think it's really, really important for you to explore what you are capable of when it comes to environmentalism or advocacy. It's realizing, for example, like if you're a student from journalism, where would you think you could exercise your experience in journalism about? Is this NGO suitable for you to write articles, to convey messages, to exercise creative writing, to make passionate articles about the environment? It's all about, putting your academic experience into action. If you're from policy making, what are NGOs available to you? For example, Malaysian Youth Delegation is really about policy making for climate action. So that's a spot for you. If you think that you want to network with politicians, convince them that conservation of nature is important, Undi 18, My Hutan, that's this platform for you. Those are platforms for you to join. So always volunteer in these youth-led movements because it's important for us to have young people, new ideas coming in, but at the same time, you look into what you are capable of. There are a lot of NGOs I can suggest, like other than My Hutan, there's Climate Action, Malaysia Youth Delegation, Kuasa Perak, Project Vocal that you can join. I always suggest that you volunteer. Other than that, young people need to be vocal politically. This is when you exercise your protesting rights. This is when you connect with your members of parliament. Email to your MPs, call them, Instagram DM them, Facebook message them saying that you need to read the IPCC 6 assessment report. You need to read the IPBES global assessment on biodiversity and ecosystem services. Connecting with your MPs is really important because they need to recognize these issues and they need to transform within their constituency towards sustainable development. So I think you really need to go barging on their doors, calling that you need to read this, you need to give it to your research assistant and say that what are the policies available for you to make my constituency better. So that I always suggest that. I believe Project Youth has a template where you can email them to your MPs. You just have to connect with them. And in terms of really about everyone to be involved in environmental advocacy, regardless of age, I think it's never too late. You can always do on an individual basis, whether it's composting, whether it's zero waste, whether it's planting a tree. It's always important to do that individually to make sure that what you do is valid. But because from planting trees, you could plant trees with other NGOs and they could educate you about like what are the problems related to forestry, and you'd be motivated to do something else beyond just planting trees. It always starts with an individual action and gradually moves into a more radical, more transformative, more important reforms that you can make with other organizations or collective action. So I believe that you can always start individually and start by, when you do that, you gradually move towards collectively working with other people.
You touched a point earlier about collaboration, and I believe My Hutan is always also collaborating with all the other NGOs within the ecosystem, right?
Yes.
Yeah, there was a recent one where you also kind of like cross-shared on your social media. So the beauty of social media again is that collective voice, where you kind of amplify everyone's efforts, right? Because at the end of the day, the end goal is the same. You guys want a better Earth, better world, better Malaysia. Yeah. I want to close things off, but there is a sort of a comment that came in, and I just wanted to share that out of respect for Dia. It says here, maybe that's the hardest part. We do not know how to reach or connect or even to search those NGOs. I suppose she was referring to, you saying contacting the MPs and stuff like that, right? And even, throwing in the NGOs for that matter. I am an environmental and occupational health student myself, but I don't see potential in myself. So she continued on to say, maybe we do not think we are competent or good enough, but she ended it by saying, but I'll take those advices. So Aidil, I think that kind of sums up the session here today. You have gave a lot of advice, a lot of your wisdom, and in fact, for myself, I think I learned quite a fair bit from just this very short, concise conversation that I've had with you, Aidil, and I do hope we keep in touch in the future, because there's a lot to be done, and I always believe that it cannot be done by one party. It cannot be done individually. We need to all hold hands and do this together, and I believe you would have the same thinking as me as well.
Definitely, I completely agree. I think that summarized everything that I want to convey. To the previous comment, do not falter. Do not feel like you are undermined for what you do. There are great networks. You can just, for example, if you know my Twitter, you could just connect with me or My Hutan. I'm willing to provide resources for you in terms of volunteering and advocacy. Just reach out to me. Anyone who is watching this, you can reach out on my Twitter or My Hutan and ask, like, what can you do as an individual? What organizations are available? I am very much happy to share those resources with everyone.
Yeah. So under the platform, under the speaker section, when you search for Aidil and you click on more info, you will be able to see a short bio of himself, as well as the methods in which you would like to communicate with Aidil as well. So as Aidil has mentioned, his Twitter, My Hutan's Instagram and all that. So I believe the DMs are always open, yes?
Definitely. Feel free to do so.
Okay, great. Aidil, one last thing. It is somewhat the Merdeka weekend. Would you like to say something to our Malaysian audience?
Oh, definitely. Selamat Merdeka to everyone. I think I think this is a very, agenda of mine, saying that, are we Merdeka from fossil fuel combustion and use? So that is something that we need to ponder upon, whether can ecosystems and the stability of the climate be independent from, gain independence from fossil fuel use and other forms of degradation. So I think that's something to ponder upon for anyone who's watching this.
Lovely. And with that, Aidil, I'd like to say a big thank you again. I can understand now why your parents are so proud of you. I am also very proud of you, like all our audiences here today, for the things that you have done and for the things that you are doing for Malaysia. And with that, I would like to say to you, stay well, stay safe, and do take care. And we will catch up with you again. All right? Take care.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Take care and be safe, everyone.
Hi, my name is Aru. I am one of the researchers and co-founders at Klima Action Malaysia, which is a climate justice movement here based in Kuala Lumpur. I would like to wish everyone Happy Nationals Day. Selamat Hari Kebangsaan.
Greetings all, it's Conso Titus here from Melbourne, Australia. Just dropping a short little video message here to my friend Andrew Tai and all his colleagues at SNAPC at the Malaysia's premier virtual event solution provider. Selamat Hari Kebangsaan to all of you. Wishing you all a safe, healthy Malaysian Independence Day on the 31st of August. Please take care of each other and enjoy all the Independence Day celebrations. See you soon.
Hello all, this is Craig Langley. I run a global business development agency based near London, and I'd just like to wish everyone a very happy National Day. Salamat Hari Kabang Sayan.
Hi everyone, my name is Ria Eichmann. I'm a global skills coach and an intercultural trainer based in Brisbane, Australia. I would like to wish you all a happy National Day. Salamat Hari Kebangsaan.
Hello everyone, my name is SLAVCHEVA, CEO at Innovate Circular and Sustainable and founder at SO, based in Oslo, Norway. I would like to wish you all a wonderful national celebration. Salamat Hari Kebangsaan.
Hey everyone, Tyler Chin here, interview coach and founder of Transform Cultures. Just want to stop by and wish all my fellow Malaysians a Selamat Menyambut Hari Kebangsaan. Stay safe everyone and hope all is well with you.
Happy National Day Malaysia! Salamat Hari Kebangsaan. I'm Serena, founder and CEO of Care Bear, a mental health technology startup and social enterprise based here in Hong Kong, where we alleviate depressive symptoms among youth. I hope all of you prosperity and most importantly good health, and I wish you guys all the best. Bye!